He laughed in a child's face loud, dismissive, mocking the boy for saying his dad was a Navy SEAL. The crowd stared, waiting for the kid to break. But what no one expected was the sound of boots on tile when the truth walked in through those sliding doors. This is a story about pride, prejudice, and the moment silence turned into respect. If you love powerful, true-to-life stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, because this one will stay with you long after it ends. The scanner beeped steadily, like the pulse of some giant machine. The supermarket was buzzing, smell of oranges mixing with the plastic tang of new shelves, overhead speakers pushing out some forgettable pop song. Jordan stood at checkout lane 12, backpack slung over one shoulder, hugging a carton of milk and a couple of granola bars as if they were a lifeline. He was 11, skinny-shouldered, dark eyes darting toward the sliding glass doors where people drifted in and out, beneath sale posters. "My dad's running late," Jordan told his friend Ben, who was pushing a cart loaded with soda for his kid sister's birthday party. Jordan tried to sound casual, like it was nothing more than a weather report. "He's still at the base." "What base?" Ben asked, wide-eyed. "Coronado," Jordan answered, feeling a little spark go off in his chest. "My dad's with the SEALs. His schedule's pretty unpredictable." Ben whistled and made a sloppy swim motion with his arms. "Whoa, that's insane. You ever get to hold his gear? Like the masks or those knives?" Jordan laughed, shaking his head. "He doesn't bring stuff home. Just scars." He regretted the word as soon as it left his mouth. Scars opened doors to places he didn't want anyone's imagination wandering. "SEALs, huh?" The voice cut in low, sharp, with the kind of practiced skepticism that fills the silence on purpose. Jordan turned. A man leaned against the magazine rack. Gray t-shirt stretched across broad shoulders, faded jeans. A badge clipped to his belt gleamed like a piece of jewelry. His eyes, cold, pale blue, were fixed on Jordan. "Double quotes, kid. You've been watching too many movies." Jordan froze. Ben fumbled. "No, seriously." "His dad's," the man laughed. Not kindly. Not amused. The sound cracked across the checkout lane like a cue for everyone nearby to glance over. A mother nudged her toddler to the side. The cashier lifted her head, then ducked back down to her till. "SEALs?" The man repeated, dragging the word out like chewing gum. "What's next tomorrow? He's an astronaut." Jordan swallowed. "I'm not making it up." Sure. The man rubbed his chin, still grinning. "My boy used to say his dad was Spider-Man. Cute, but not real." Heat rushed up Jordan's neck. He felt pinned in place, nailed down by eyes that weren't even cruel, just entertained. The kind of attention that burns worse than anger. "Why would you say that in front of everyone?" Jordan asked, voice tighter than he wanted. "Because I like the truth," the man shot back, smirk never fading. "And the truth is, kids make stuff up. Especially kids who want their parents to be heroes." He tapped his badge with 2 fingers like punctuation. "I've been in law enforcement 20 years. Trust me, I know what's real." Jordan's chest locked. His dad had been gone for weeks. He'd reread his last letter until the pencil strokes smudged. He knew the shadow box in their living room wasn't full of make-believe, but how could he explain that here, under the glare of supermarket lights, with strangers watching like it was a show? "Dad's a lieutenant commander," Jordan muttered, barely above a whisper. The man's smirk widened, like Jordan had just handed him another punchline. "Sounds fancy." He swept a glance at the people in line, fishing for nods. "But let me tell you something, kid. Navy SEALs? That's the best of the best. Years of brutal training, combat deployments. I've seen real soldiers. I know what they look like." The words landed like blows. Jordan clenched his fists, knuckles damp against the milk carton. "What do you know about what my dad looks like?" The man leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound personal, but loud enough for the nearby shoppers to hear. "I'm saving you from yourself. You keep telling stories like this, people are gonna laugh. And once that starts, it doesn't stop. Ben tugged at Jordan's sleeve. Let's just go outside, man. But Jordan's sneakers felt glued to the floor. Running meant carrying that laugh with him, hearing it in the car, at dinner, in his sleep. He stood still, throat dry, heat clawing up his face. The man chuckled again, folding his arms. Tell you what, kid. If your dad walks in here in uniform, I'll buy you those groceries myself. Till then, keep the fairy tales at home. Fairy tales. The word cracked like a slap. Jordan's nails bit into his palms. He looked up, finally locking eyes with the man. His voice was thin but steady. You're not laughing at me. You're laughing at what you can't understand. For half a second, something flickered across the man's face, an almost imperceptible slip. Then the smirk came back. You're a smart mouth. Ever think about joining debate club? Jordan opened his mouth to answer, then the sliding doors at the entrance hissed open. Cold air swept in, along with the sound of boots striking tile. The rhythm was steady, deliberate. People in the lobby shifted aside without even realizing they were doing it. And Jordan knew, 2 steps before he even saw the uniform, exactly who it was. The automatic doors slid open with a sigh, letting in a gust of air that smelled of asphalt and fast food grease from the food court outside. Every head in the checkout lane turned toward the sound of boots striking tile measured. Steady, unhurried. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Hayes walked in wearing his navy blues, the dark uniform pressed sharp enough to cut glass. His posture carried weight, every step announcing itself without needing volume. His cap was tucked under one arm, his eyes scanning the store the way a pilot scans a horizon. Shoppers instinctively moved aside, clearing a path without knowing why. Jordan's chest tightened. Relief flooded him so fast it nearly knocked the air out of his lungs. He didn't run to him. He couldn't. Something in the gravity of his father's stride pinned him in place, as though the floor itself wanted him rooted there. Reeves, the off-duty cop who'd been laughing minutes earlier, straightened at the sight of the uniform. His smirk held, but it faltered at the edges like paint peeling under pressure. For a heartbeat, he looked like a man who wished he'd kept his mouth shut. Daniel reached his son and placed a calloused hand on his shoulder. Son, he said, voice calm, steady, meant only for him. What happened? Jordan swallowed hard, eyes darting toward Reeves. His throat felt raw. I told them the truth, he whispered. They didn't believe me. Daniel followed his gaze. His eyes landed on Reeves' tall, broad badge gleaming at his hip. The room went quieter, as if the music overhead had dimmed. Even the cashier's scanner paused between beeps. Daniel's voice dropped, low but carrying. You called my son a liar? The question wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. Authority lived in the stillness around it. Reeves forced a chuckle, scratching the back of his neck. Hey now, let's not blow this out of proportion. I was just teasing the kid. No harm meant, no harm? Daniel repeated, his gaze unwavering. You mocked him in front of strangers. That's harm. A ripple moved through the shoppers. A woman holding a basket of apples stopped pretending to browse. A man in a baseball cap folded his arms, watching closely. Phones appeared in hands, screens lighting up as they angled discreetly toward the confrontation. Reeves shifted his weight. Look, Commander, Lieutenant Commander, Daniel corrected. Not raising his voice, but slicing the title sharp. Reeves cleared his throat. Lieutenant Commander. With all due respect, Daniel said evenly, doesn't begin with laughter at a child. The words landed heavy, sinking into the space like anchors. Jordan stood taller, the knot of shame in his chest loosening. Reeves tried to smile, but it rang hollow. I didn't mean anything by it. Just thought it was unusual. That's all. Unusual doesn't mean impossible, Daniel said. He took a step closer, not aggressive, but deliberate. It just means you've never seen it before. The failure of your imagination is not my son's burden to carry. A teenager near the soda display whispered. Damn, under his breath, eyes wide, Reeves licked his lips, glancing nervously at the gathering crowd. His earlier confidence was thinning, like ice cracking underfoot. I never said anything about race. Or, he cut himself short, realizing what he'd revealed in the way he stumbled. Daniel tilted his head, gaze unblinking. You didn't have to. Your laugh said it for you. A murmur rippled through the bystanders. The woman with the apples nodded faintly. The cashier froze with a receipt halfway toward. Reeves's jaw tightened. Fine, maybe I came across wrong. But I didn't mean to embarrass the boy. Intent doesn't erase impact, Daniel replied. His hand squeezed Jordan's shoulder lightly, steadying him. He stood here, telling the truth, while a man with a badge turned it into entertainment. Do you have any idea what that does to a kid? Jordan felt heat rise in his eyes, but this time it wasn't shame. It was pride, swelling in his chest as his father spoke the words he hadn't been able to find. Reeves shifted again, arms crossing over his chest like armor. Look, I said I was wrong. What else do you want? An apology? Daniel's voice was calm, razor-edged. Yes, to him. Not to me. The demand hung heavy in the air. The crowd leaned closer, waiting. Reeves's face flushed. He turned toward Jordan, jaw clenched. Sorry, kid. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Try again. A murmur of agreement rose from the onlookers. Reeves looked trapped, his earlier smirk long gone. Finally, he exhaled hard, shoulders sagging. Jordan, he said, forcing himself to meet the boy's eyes. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have laughed at you. I shouldn't have said what I said. You told the truth, and I didn't believe you. That was wrong, for the first time since it all began. Jordan breathed without the weight of humiliation crushing his chest. He nodded once, firm. Daniel gave a small nod of approval, then turned back to the crowd, not just Reeves. His voice carried, steady and clear. This isn't about one man and one boy. This is about what happens when people choose to laugh instead of listen. My son shouldn't have to defend my career to strangers. He shouldn't have to stand in tears because someone couldn't imagine his truth being real. The silence was thick, charged. And then softly, almost hesitant clapping. The woman with the apple started it. A teenager joined. Soon, the sound spread low, steady applause filling the checkout lane. Reeves flushed crimson. He gave a curt nod and stepped back, retreating toward the exit. The badge at his hip no longer gleamed. It looked like dead weight. Daniel bent slightly, leveling his eyes with his son's. You okay? Jordan's throat tightened, but he nodded. Yeah, I hate that it happened. Daniel rested a hand on his shoulder. Sometimes the hardest lessons don't come from the battlefield. They come from here, ordinary places, ordinary people. And when they happen, you remember them. Jordan blinked against tears. For the first time that day, they weren't from humiliation. They were from pride. Dad, he whispered. Thank you. Daniel shook his head gently. No, son. Thank you. You told the truth when it wasn't easy. That takes more courage than anything I've done in uniform. The words settled deep, like armor Jordan would carry forever. As they gathered their groceries and headed for the exit, people stepped aside, not with pity, not with disbelief, but with respect. Phones lowered. Eyes softened. Jordan walked taller beside his father, sneakers squeaking against the tile. The shame was gone. What lingered instead was something heavier, something steadier, the knowledge that truth doesn't shrink just because someone laughs at it. And for every stranger in that supermarket, the lesson hung in the air long after the doors slid shut behind them. The sliding doors whispered shut behind them, sealing off the fluorescent lit stage they'd just left. Outside, the air was different, warmer, scented with cut grass from the strip of median fried food drifting from the chain restaurant across the lot. The parking lot buzzed with the soft hum of idling engines and the squeak of shopping carts rolling across asphalt. Jordan let out breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His body felt lighter, like someone had finally untied a knot in his chest. Beside him, Daniel walked with the same unhurried stride, one hand steady on the grocery bag, the other resting briefly on his son's shoulder before sliding back to his side. His uniform drew looks even here, parents pausing mid-step, a couple leaning against their car straightening as he passed. But he didn't acknowledge any of it. His attention stayed on his son. "You did good," Daniel said simply. Unlocking their truck with a click, Jordan hesitated before climbing in. "I don't feel like I did good. I just stood there." Daniel set the groceries in the back seat, then leaned against the open door, facing him. "Standing there is harder than you think. Most people walk away. You didn't." Jordan's gaze dropped to his sneakers, scuffed from playground basketball. "It felt like everyone was watching me fall apart. They were watching you hold your ground," Daniel corrected, his voice even but certain. "And that matters." The truck smelled faintly of leather and engine oil. When Daniel started it, the low rumble filled the silence between them. For a while, they just sat there, the hum of the air conditioner pushing back the heat of the day. Jordan finally asked, "Do people laugh at you too? You know, when you're in uniform?" Daniel's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. He didn't answer right away. He let the question hang in the air, giving it weight. "More than you'd think," he said at last. "Sometimes to my face. Sometimes behind my back. Doesn't matter where you go. Son, there's always someone who can't believe you are who you say you are." Jordan frowned. "So what do you do?" "I keep doing my job," Daniel said. He glanced at his son, the lines at the corners of his eyes deepening. "You don't live your truth to convince them. You live it because it's yours. That's all the proof you need." The words settled heavy in Jordan's chest, the way his father's lessons always did, like stones dropped in deep water. They pulled out of the lot, the supermarket shrinking behind them. The day's light was softening into evening, streaks of pink cutting across the sky. Cars moved lazily down the boulevard, headlights just beginning to flicker on. Jordan pressed his forehead against the window, watching the world slide by. "When he laughed at me," he admitted quietly, "for a second I almost believed him. Like maybe I shouldn't have said anything at all." Daniel's jaw worked. He kept his eyes on the road. "That's what shame does. It makes you doubt yourself even when you know you're right. That's why it's such a dangerous weapon. Stronger than fists sometimes." Jordan thought about that. He imagined his father on some faraway mission, surrounded by shadows and silence, carrying orders no one else understood. And then he thought of the laughter in the checkout lane, the sting of it. Maybe, in its own way, that laugh had been just as sharp as any weapon. Daniel must have sensed his thoughts, because he spoke again, softer now. "You don't let anyone strip your pride from you. Once it's gone, it takes years to get back." "Sometimes never." Jordan turned from the window. "Is that why you always keep your medals locked in the cabinet?" Daniel glanced at him, a small smile ghosting across his lips. "I keep them there because they're not just mine. They belong to the men I served with. Some didn't come home. I won't put them on display like trophies. But I also won't let anyone call them fake." The words carried a weight. Jordan could feel in his bones. Traffic slowed at a light. The truck idled, turn signals ticking like a metronome. Daniel drummed his fingers once against the wheel, then stilled them. "You asked if people laugh at me," he said. "Here's the truth. It doesn't stop. But neither do I, and neither will you." Jordan sat straighter, something sparking in his chest. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The light turned green. The truck rolled forward, merging with the flow of cars, headlights stretching out into the twilight. For the first time all day, Jordan felt taller not because of how others looked at him, but because of how he looked at himself. By the time they pulled into the driveway, the sky had darkened to a deep indigo. Porch lights flickered on up and down the street, little halos against the settling dusk. Their house sat quiet, blinds half drawn, the silhouette of the oak tree in the yard stretching long across the lawn. Jordan carried the lighter bag of groceries while his father hefted the rest. The screen door creaked when Daniel pushed it open. The familiar scent of home laundry soap, old books, and something simmering in the crockpot wrapped around them. "Welcome back." A voice called from the kitchen. Jordan's mom, Claire, stepped out, wiping her hands on a towel. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, strands escaping around her face. When her eyes landed on Daniel's uniform, they softened, but her gaze flicked quickly to Jordan. She knew something had happened. "You're early," she said to Daniel, a half smile tugging her lips. "Traffic was kind," Daniel answered, setting the groceries on the counter. His tone was light, but Claire caught the shift in the air. She always did. Jordan dropped the milk into the fridge, then hesitated. His mother crouched slightly, brushing a hand along his cheek. "You okay, bud?" He wanted to say yes to keep it simple, but the knot in his chest twisted again. "A man laughed at me," he blurted. "At the store. He said I made up that Dad's a seal," Claire stilled. Her hand lingered against his face. For a long moment, she said nothing, only glanced at Daniel over Jordan's head. The look between them carried years of shared silence, deployments, phone calls cut short, and nights explaining to a child why his father wasn't home. "I handled it," Daniel said quietly. "I know you did," she replied, equally quiet. Her eyes returned to Jordan. "But I'm proud you spoke up first." Jordan's throat tightened. It didn't feel brave. It felt stupid. Like I was just giving him something to laugh at. Claire knelt so her eyes were level with his. "That's what courage feels like most of the time. Messy, awkward. It doesn't come with a soundtrack or applause. You only know it's courage when you'd rather run, but you don't." Jordan blinked hard. The memory of the checkout lane flashing in his mind phone's recording, strangers whispering, his chest burning. And then, the sound of boots on tile. Daniel set a hand on his wife's shoulder, grounding the moment. He stood his ground. "That's all I needed to see." Claire squeezed Jordan's hands. "That's all I'll ever need to see." They ate dinner in the warm light of the kitchen, the crockpot stew ladled into mismatched bowls. Conversation drifted to school, to Theo's upcoming baseball game, to whether the old truck would finally need a new transmission. Ordinary things. And yet, beneath it all, something deeper pulsed, an unspoken recognition that the world outside their walls could bruise. But within these walls, it would always heal. Afterward, Jordan found himself on the back porch, knees tucked to his chest, watching moths fling themselves at the porch light. His father joined him, setting 2 mugs of cocoa on the railing. Steam curled into the night. Daniel sipped, then said, "You know, in my line of work, silence can be louder than gunfire. You learn to trust it. Tonight, you learned the opposite, how dangerous silence can be when nobody speaks up." Jordan turned the mug in his hands. "It hurt more than I thought it would." Daniel nodded. "Truth often does. But that's why it matters." The oak tree rustled, its branches swaying in the breeze. Jordan glanced up at his dad. "Will it always be like this? People not believing us?" Daniel's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in thought. "Some will doubt. Some will mock. But some will listen. And every time you choose to stand tall, you teach them something, even if they don't admit it." Jordan leaned against his father's arm, the fabric of the uniform rough but solid. "I don't want to forget how it felt. I don't want to forget what you said in the store." Daniel set his mug down and wrapped an arm around him. "Then don't carry it with you. Use it. One day, when it's someone else being laughed at, you'll remember this moment and you'll be the one who speaks." Jordan's chest swelled. a quiet promise forming where shame used to sit. "I will," he whispered from inside. Claire's voice called, "Don't let the cocoa get cold." Daniel chuckled, ruffling his son's hair before standing. "Come on, soldier. Tomorrow's another day." Jordan followed him in, the warmth of the house spilling over them like a blanket. And for the first time since the sting of that laughter, Jordan didn't feel small. He felt steady. He felt seen. Long after the bowls were rinsed and stacked, after the porch light clicked off and the house sank into quiet, Jordan lay awake in his room. The laughter from the supermarket tried to creep back in sharp, dismissive, meant to shrink him down. But now it sounded smaller, like an echo from a faraway cave. What stayed louder was something else. His father's hand steady on his shoulder, his mother's voice telling him courage rarely feels clean. He thought about how many people had watched, phones raised, eyes hungry for a show. Not one of them had stepped in until his father arrived. And yet, when truth finally walked through those sliding doors in a pressed uniform, the whole store shifted. Silence turned to respect. Mockery turned to applause. It wasn't magic. It was just the undeniable weight of what was real. Jordan rolled onto his side, staring at the medals in the shadow box on his dresser. They glinted faintly in the sliver of streetlight, sneaking through the blinds. Once, he'd thought they were just his dad's. Now he understood they belonged to him. 2 invisible medals for standing still when it mattered. Down the hall, he heard his parents' low voices, laughter weaving through fatigue. The sound settled over him like armor. Maybe, he thought, courage wasn't about winning the argument. Maybe it was about holding your ground long enough for the truth to arrive. The next morning, the supermarket would be back to normal. People would grab their groceries, swipe their cards, forget the scene that had played out under fluorescent lights. But not everyone. Someone would remember the boy who refused to shrink. Someone would remember the soldier who walked in and made the air heavier just by standing tall. And maybe, just maybe, the next time they heard laughter used as a weapon, they'd think twice before staying silent. Jordan closed his eyes, finally drifting off. In his dreams, the boots on tile weren't just his father's anymore. They were his own, steady and certain, echoing forward into a life where truth didn't need permission to exist, because some lessons don't fade. They carved themselves deep. And the one etched into him now was simple enough to last a lifetime. Respect costs nothing. But the absence of it leaves scars no one can see. In a supermarket aisle, a boy learned the hardest lesson. People will laugh, dismiss, and try to make you smaller. But he also learned something stronger, that truth doesn't shrink under ridicule, and courage often looks like simply standing tall. His father's words echo still. Respect costs nothing. Withholding it leaves scars. If this story moved you, let it remind you to defend the truth, and to never let someone's laughter define your worth. For more stories that matter, make sure you subscribe and carry this lesson with you.